Good evening, everyone. It's good to be with you. Today, I want to share with you a parable that I think speaks to the time that we're in. It's a time when there's a lot of teaching about the Bible, but sometimes it seems like that the teaching is far from the truth of the Bible. And there's a lot of things kind of just mixed together and thrown together, world philosophy thrown in with scripture that's pulled out of context in order to verify or back up kind of own prejudice and own beliefs and things like that. And it's just a difficult time because it's hard to kind of sift through the truth of what's going on. And in this scripture, Jesus tells this parable to the Pharisees, and it's partly, I think, it's the same struggle that they were having back then. It's an idea of we try to follow God the best we can, but sometimes even in our own thinking, we can get things mucked up a little bit. So I want to read to you this scripture, this parable, and then I want to talk about a few points that I see here in the scripture. It comes from Matthew chapter 13, starts with verse 24. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed seed among the wheat, and it went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weed also appeared. The owner's servant came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where did the weed come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. And the servant asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you're pulling the weeds, you might pull up some of the wheat with them. Let them both grow together until the harvest, and at that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned. Then gather the wheat and bring them into my barn." And I really like that scripture because it says basically four things. First of all, we need to recognize that wheat and weeds look a lot alike. In fact, some scriptures use the word tares in this verse, and tares is referring to a type of plant-based thing. It's called darnel, and it actually looks a lot like wheat. And so there's some understanding that maybe this darnel plant was part of this weed that was deliberately sown by the enemy. Why would he do that? Well, because darnel is a poisonous wheat, and it can cause some digestive issues. It can kind of upset the digestive system. And so the idea is you plant this into your enemy's field. When they go to harvest the wheat, they make flour and bread out of it. They eat it. It poisons them. It kind of makes them sick and irritable. It becomes no good. And it's not just for the people eating it. It's also bad for the animals as well. And so the idea here is that you slow down production, you make things difficult for them, and above all else, you have the opportunity to kind of do some harm to the livestock. And that's the reason why. In fact, I guess apparently in the Roman days, there was a law that said it is illegal to plant darnel in the enemy's fields of somebody who is your enemy. And the reason is because it's a way to sabotage the crop. But they look a lot alike. And you can't really tell the difference up until a certain point. In fact, you can't tell a difference at all. And I think that speaks clearly to how people are today. There's a lot of people claiming to be Christian, and I don't want to be the one to say that person is a Christian, that person is not a Christian. I don't know that I could ever be that person, because we all look a lot alike. We all have our faults, and we all have our flaws. And sometimes we kind of want to just say, hey, let's just all get along, right? But there is a difference. There is a difference between someone who's flawed in seeking the Lord and someone who's flawed in using the Lord as an excuse to do what they want. And I can't tell the difference because they look a lot alike. But God can tell the difference, and that'll be something I speak to here in just a second. The second thing I wanted to point out is that the farmer then said to the servants, don't pull those up yet. Let them grow together. It was to give them time to produce what it is they produce, so that then it becomes apparent what each one is. Okay, and the idea is that the farmer's going to let the wheat produce its fruit to reveal what it really is. If it's wheat, it will look like wheat. If it's darnel, it will look a little different, and we can identify that and then separate those. And I like that because, number one, it's the truth. We could all be Christians, claiming to be Christians, doing the same thing, even with our faults and flaws, but the fruit of our life will actually reveal the heart that we have inside of us. And I think that's what's important, is we need to not be casting judgment too soon. Let God be the judge of that. But at the same time, the fruit of a person's life, what comes out of them, reveals the true heart that they have for the Lord. And then the third thing that I want to bring out is that judgment is real. After the farmer says, let them grow together, he did say, but at the harvest, we will separate the two. We will separate the wheat from the weeds, and the wheat will be bundled up and taken into the barn, and the weeds will be burned up and thrown into the fire. And I want to read to you a second part of this parable, because Jesus, this doesn't happen very often, but Jesus actually explains this parable himself. And so it continues in verse 37, when he says, he answered, the one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are the angels. And then listen to what he says here. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out the kingdom of everything that causes sin, and all who do evil, and they will throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The righteous will shine like the sun of the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears, let him hear. I like that verse, and I don't like that verse, because what it actually says is there is real judgment. There is going to be a time when God will make the determining factor on whether or not you did what he asked you to do. We do not have to earn our way into God's kingdom by being good. But once we get God's kingdom in our heart, once we receive the forgiveness of Jesus and we become part of him, we should be producing the fruit of his kingdom in our hearts and our minds and the way we act and the way we treat people. And that's not necessarily the way the world's going today. There's a lot of people that wear that cross, and the fruit of their life is not glorifying him. And it would be easy for me to just start looking at individuals and looking on the surface of what I see and picking them out and saying, that's not a good guy, that's a good guy, that's not a good guy. That's really not my role. My role is to produce fruit out of my own life and follow him. But there is judgment. And at some point, each individual will be looked at by the Lord, and they will be judged based on, did they produce the fruit that God intended them to have in their life? Or did they use the name of Christian, use the idea of Christian, use the forgiveness that God gives for their own gain? Did they do it so that they could just get away with more evil? And so it's a good verse and a scary verse, but I just want to encourage you with that, because the whole idea of life here on this earth is to glorify God. And if we're not doing that, then we need to get closer and closer to him so that we can do that. And the truth will be revealed. And I love that parable because it basically says that, yeah, we all have time to show ourselves, to show the true heart. But in the end, God will make that determination based on what he sees in us. I want to encourage you guys to produce the fruit of God's Spirit. Follow him truly. Listen to his word, and without your prejudice, but with, leaning on his wisdom and his guidance. And when you do that, you will produce the fruit that God is desiring for you to produce. You guys have a great night, and we'll talk to you later.